Have you ever witnessed someone being treated so cruelly that it made your blood boil? Have you ever seen power and privilege being weaponized against someone who's just trying to make an honest living? What you're about to hear isn't just a story. It's a raw, unfiltered account of how darkness can enter our lives in the most unexpected moments, and how justice, when it arrives with the force of thunder. Picture this: a quiet Tuesday evening at Rosewood Diner, a modest family-owned restaurant tucked away in the heart of a small American town. The kind of place where everybody knows everybody, where the coffee is always fresh, and where the smell of home-cooked meals fills the air with warmth and comfort. This wasn't some fancy five-star establishment with crystal chandeliers and gold-plated silverware. No, this was a place built on hard work, honest service, and the sweat of people who believed in the dignity of labor. Sarah Mitchell had been working at Rosewood Diner for 3 years. 24 years old, with dreams bigger than the small town she grew up in. She was saving every penny she earned to put herself through nursing school. Every smile she gave to customers, every extra shift she took, every time she stayed late to help clean up. It was all part of her plan. A plan to become something more. A plan to help people. A plan to make her late mother proud. But plans, as we all know, can be derailed in the blink of an eye. On this particular evening, Sarah was covering the dinner shift. Her feet ached from standing all day, but she maintained that bright, welcoming smile she was known for. The diner was moderately busy. Nothing she couldn't handle. Regulars occupied their usual spots. Families enjoyed their meals, and everything seemed perfectly normal. That is, until they walked in. Marcus and Vanessa Thornwell. If privilege had a face, it would look exactly like them. Marcus, in his late 40s, wore a suit that probably cost more than Sarah's monthly rent. His Rolex caught the light with every movement of his wrist, as if demanding attention, screaming wealth at anyone who dared to look. Vanessa, draped in designer labels from head to toe, carried herself with the kind of arrogance that only comes from never having heard the word no in her entire life. Her diamond earrings sparkled like tiny stars, but there was nothing bright about the cold, calculating look in her eyes. They didn't walk into Rosewood Diner. They invaded it. The moment they crossed the threshold, the atmosphere shifted. Marcus surveyed the restaurant with barely concealed disgust, as if the mere act of being in such a common establishment was beneath him. Vanessa wrinkled her nose, adjusting her Hermes scarf, as if protecting herself from contamination. Sarah, ever the professional, approached them with her standard greeting. "Good evening. Welcome to Rosewood Diner. Table for 2. Her voice was cheerful, genuine. The voice of someone who still believed in the goodness of people despite the hardships life had thrown her way. Marcus didn't even look at her. He simply pointed to a booth by the window and said, "There. And make it quick. We don't have all night to waste in this establishment." The way he said that last word dripped with condescension, as if he were forced to dine in a trash heap. Sarah felt the first prick of unease, but pushed it aside. She'd dealt with difficult customers before. Working in service teaches you to develop thick skin, to smile through the subtle insults, to maintain your dignity when others try to strip it away. She led them to the booth, handed the menus, and asked, "Can I start you off with something to drink?" Vanessa finally spoke, her voice sharp as broken glass. "Do you have anything that isn't served in plastic cups? I doubt it, but I thought I'd ask." She laughed, a cold, brittle sound that had no humor in it. It was the laugh of someone who found joy in making others feel small. Sarah kept her smile. "We have fresh iced tea, coffee, sodas, and water. Everything is served in proper glassware, ma'am." "Proper glassware," Vanessa repeated mockingly, turning to Marcus. "Did you hear that, darling? Proper glassware. How quaint." She turned back to Sarah, looking her up and down with undisguised disdain. "I'll have water. Bottled, if this place knows what that is. And make sure the bottle is unopened. I don't trust the sanitation standards here." Marcus added, "Coffee. Black. And if it tastes like dishwater, I'll send it back." It wasn't a joke. It was a threat. Sarah nodded, wrote down their orders, and walked away. As she did, she heard Vanessa's voice carry across the diner, intentionally loud enough for others to hear. "Can you believe we're stuck in this dump? I told you we should have driven to the city. But no, you insisted we try somewhere authentic. Well, this is certainly authentic poverty. The other diners shifted uncomfortably. Some looked away, embarrassed on Sarah's behalf. Others exchanged glances, wondering if someone would say something. But this is how it always works, isn't it? We witness injustice. We feel the anger rise in our chests, but we remain silent, convincing ourselves it's not our business, that getting involved would only make things worse. Sarah returned with her drinks. She placed the unopened water bottle in front of Vanessa and the coffee in front of Marcus. Her hands were steady, her professionalism intact. Are you ready to order? Or would you like a few more minutes? Marcus took a sip of his coffee and immediately grimaced with exaggerated disgust. This is undrinkable. Absolutely undrinkable. Did you make this with sewer water? He pushed the cup toward her so forcefully that hot coffee sloshed onto the table and onto Sarah's apron. I'm sorry, sir. I can get you a fresh cup, Sarah offered, her voice still calm despite the humiliation. A fresh cup of the same garbage? Marcus sneered. What's the point? You people wouldn't know good coffee if it hit you in your pathetic face. You people. Those two words carry so much weight, don't they? They create division. They establish hierarchy. They strip away humanity and replace it with categories. The worthy and the unworthy. The important and the insignificant. Sarah felt her cheeks flush, but she maintained her composure. I'll speak with the manager if you'd like to discuss our coffee selection, sir. Vanessa leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with malicious pleasure. Oh, look at her, Marcus. She's getting defensive. How adorable. Tell me, sweetie, how much do you make in a week? Probably what I spend on a single manicure. She held up her perfectly manicured nails, as if presenting evidence in a court of superiority. Something inside Sarah twisted, not from shame about her financial situation, but from the sheer cruelty of the attack. Still, she needed this job. She needed every dollar to make her dreams come true. She couldn't afford to fight back. So she did what millions of service workers do every single day. She swallowed her pride, her anger, her pain, and she nodded politely. I'll give you a few minutes to look over the menu, she said quietly, turning to leave. But Vanessa wasn't done. Oh no, people like Vanessa are never done. There's something about cruelty that feeds on itself, that grows bigger with each successful blow. Wait, she commanded, her voice sharp enough to cut steel. Come back here. Now. Sarah turned back, her heart beginning to race. Something in Vanessa's tone warned her that this was about to get worse. Much worse. Bend down, Vanessa ordered, pointing to the table. There's water on the table from your carelessness. Clean it up. With your apron, since you clearly don't have proper service towels. The diner had gone completely silent now. All conversation had stopped. Every eye was on this scene unfolding, this public execution of dignity and self-worth. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she pulled a cloth from her apron pocket. She leaned down to wipe the table, trying to complete the task quickly and escape this nightmare. But Marcus had other plans. As Sarah bent over the table, he suddenly grabbed her wrist with brutal force. Not like that, you incompetent fool. Put some effort into it. Pain shot through Sarah's arm as Marcus squeezed tighter. She tried to pull away, but his grip was vice-like. Vanessa watched with a sick smile playing at the corners of her mouth, enjoying every second of this entertainment. Please, sir, you're hurting me, Sarah said, her voice now tinged with real fear. Hurting you? Marcus laughed. You have no idea what hurt is. You're nothing. A nobody serving nobodies in a nobody restaurant. You should be grateful we even acknowledged your existence. And then it happened. The moment that would change everything. The moment that would reveal just how far cruelty could go when unchecked by consequence or conscience. Marcus yanked Sarah's arm violently, pulling her off balance. Her hips slammed into the edge of the table, sending sharp pain radiating through her body. Before she could recover, Marcus stood up, towering over her, his face twisted with rage that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere all at once. You spilled coffee on my expensive suit, you clumsy idiot, he roared, though no coffee had touched him. This was about power now. This was about demonstrating dominance. This was about breaking another human being simply because he could. With shocking force, Marcus grabbed Sarah by the shoulders and slammed her down onto the table. Her cheek hit the hard surface. Her arms were pinned. Her dignity shattered into 1,000 pieces in front of a room full of witnesses. Vanessa clapped slowly, mockingly. Wonderful, darling. Maybe now she'll learn her place. Time seemed to freeze. Sarah lay there, pressed against the table, tears streaming down her face, not from physical pain, but from the complete and utter violation of her humanity. This wasn't happening because she'd done anything wrong. This was happening because, in Marcus and Vanessa's world, she was less than human. She was an object, a thing to be used, abused, and discarded. The other diners sat paralyzed. Some looked away, unable to bear witness. Others stared in horror, but did nothing. The manager, a middle-aged man named Tom who owned the diner, started to move forward, but Vanessa fixed him with a threatening glare. "Don't even think about it," she hissed. "My husband is a lawyer, a very powerful lawyer. You try to defend this incompetent little nobody, and I'll make sure this pathetic establishment is sued into oblivion. We'll take everything you have. Your business, your home, your future. Do you understand me?" Tom froze. He had a family. He had bills. He had everything to lose. And so, like so many others, he made the painful calculation that his survival mattered more than doing what was right. He looked at Sarah with apologetic eyes and did nothing. This is how evil wins, isn't it? Not always through active participation, but through the silence of good people who convince themselves they have too much to lose by speaking up. Marcus finally released Sarah, shoving her away like discarded garbage. She stumbled backward, her legs barely able to support her weight. Her whole body shook, not just from the assault but from the realization that no one, absolutely no one, was going to help her. "Get out of my sight," Marcus commanded, sitting back down as if nothing had happened. "And send someone competent to take our order, if such a person exists in this dump." Sarah stood there for a moment, trying to process what had just happened, trying to understand how the world could be so dark, so cruel, so utterly devoid of justice. She looked around the diner, making eye contact with people she'd served for 3 years, people who knew her name, who knew about her dreams, who'd heard her story, and they all looked away. She turned toward the back, toward the kitchen, toward anywhere that wasn't here, when the door to the diner opened. The bell above the door chimed, that cheerful little sound that usually meant another customer, another order, another step toward her dreams. But this time, that bell might as well have been the sound of fate itself, announcing that the universe was about to balance its scales. Everyone turned to look at who had entered, and what they saw made even Marcus pause. A man stood in the doorway. Not just any man, but someone whose very presence commanded respect. He was in his mid-30s, tall and powerfully built, with the kind of posture that spoke of military discipline. He wore civilian clothes, jeans and a simple black t-shirt, but something about him screamed authority, strength, capability. His eyes, sharp and observant, immediately scanned the room with the practiced efficiency of someone trained to assess threats in split seconds. And beside him, sitting perfectly at attention, was a Belgian Malinois. The dog was magnificent, all muscle and alertness, with intelligent eyes that seemed to mirror its handler's awareness. This wasn't a pet. This was a partner. This was a working military dog, a K9 warrior who'd seen things most people couldn't imagine. The man's gaze immediately locked onto Sarah, taking in her tears, her trembling frame, her hand rubbing her bruised wrist. Then his eyes moved to Marcus and Vanessa, who were frozen in their booth, suddenly uncertain. He walked forward slowly, deliberately, his K9 moving in perfect sync beside him. There was no hurry in his movements, but there was something absolutely terrifying in his calm. It was the calm of someone who'd faced real danger, real evil, and knew exactly how to deal with it. He stopped a few feet from Marcus and Vanessa's booth. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, controlled, but it carried through the silent diner like thunder rolling across a summer sky. "I'm going to ask this one time, and one time only," he said, his eyes never leaving Marcus's face. "Did I just walk in on you assaulting that young woman?" Marcus's face flushed. You could see him trying to regain his composure, trying to summon the arrogance that had served him So, well, just moments before. This is none of your business, he blustered. This is between me and the incompetent staff of this establishment. I suggest you sit down, order your food, and mind your own affairs. The man didn't move, didn't blink. His canine remained perfectly still, but you could sense the coiled power in that dog, ready to be unleashed on command. See, that's where you're wrong, the man said, his voice dropping even lower, becoming even more dangerous. When I see someone being hurt, when I see someone abusing their position to harm another human being, it becomes my business. It becomes everyone's business. So I'm going to ask you again, and I'd think very carefully about how you answer. Did you put your hands on that woman? Did you hurt her? Vanessa stood up, her face contorted with indignation. Do you know who we are? My husband is Marcus Thornwell, one of the most successful attorneys in this state. You're threatening us? I'll have you arrested for intimidation. I'll have that dog put down. Ma'am, the man interrupted, his voice now carrying a steel edge that made Vanessa actually step back. I'm going to stop you right there. First, I don't care if your husband is the President of the United States. Wealth and position don't give anyone the right to assault another human being. Second, you're not going to have anyone arrested. Third, if you even think about touching my dog, you'll discover exactly how much self-control I actually have. And trust me, you don't want to find out where that line is. He took a step closer, and now Marcus stood up as well, trying to use his height to intimidate. But it was like a house cat trying to intimidate a lion. The difference in their presence, their capability, their fundamental nature was so vast that Marcus's attempted dominance appeared pathetic. I served 8 years as a Navy SEAL, the man continued, and now his identity became clear. This wasn't just any man. This was a warrior, someone who'd operated in the darkest corners of the world, who'd faced enemies that would break lesser men, who'd been trained to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. I deployed 4 times to combat zones. I've seen real evil. I've fought it. I've defeated it. And you know what I learned? Evil comes in all forms. Sometimes it's a terrorist with a bomb, and sometimes it's a coward in an expensive suit who thinks money makes him untouchable. The entire diner was holding its breath. This wasn't just a confrontation anymore. This was a reckoning. This was the moment when all the silence, all the complicity, all the looking away was being called out by someone who refused to be a bystander. Rex, the SEAL said calmly, and his K9 immediately stood, every muscle tensed, eyes locked on Marcus. Watch. The dog's focus was absolute. If Marcus so much as twitched wrong, that K9 would move faster than thought itself. And everyone in the diner knew it. Marcus's face had gone from red to pale. You could see the wheels turning in his head, the calculations being made. Could he talk his way out of this? Could he threaten his way out? Could he buy his way out? I didn't assault anyone, Marcus stammered, his earlier confidence evaporating like morning mist. She was being clumsy, and I simply... You slammed her onto that table, the SEAL interrupted, pointing at the booth. I watched through the window before I came in. I saw everything. I watched you grab her, hurt her, humiliate her. I watched all these people sit here and do nothing while you violated another human being's dignity and safety. He turned to address the entire diner now, his voice rising with controlled anger. All of you. You saw what happened. You knew it was wrong. And you did nothing. You let fear and convenience dictate your morality. You let evil win because fighting it might cost you something. The shame in the room was palpable. People couldn't meet his eyes. They knew he was right. They knew they'd failed a fundamental test of human decency. Tom, the owner, finally found his voice. He threatened to sue us. To take everything. I have a family, I have. You have a conscience, the SEAL shot back. Or you should. You think I don't understand sacrifice. You think I don't understand tough choices. I've made them in combat when lives hung in the balance. But this. He gestured at Sarah, who was still standing frozen, watching this unfold as if in a dream. This wasn't a tough choice. This was a clear choice between right and wrong. And you chose wrong. He turned back to Marcus and Vanessa. Here's what's going to happen now. You're going to apologize to that young woman. A real apology. On your knees. Vanessa laughed, a high-pitched, nervous sound. You can't be serious. We're not. On your knees. The SEAL's voice cracked like a whip. Rex growled a low, rumbling sound that promised pain if commands weren't followed. Marcus looked around desperately, seeking help, an escape route, anything. But he found only the same people who'd watched Sarah's humiliation, now watching his comeuppance. And something in his brain finally grasped that he'd met someone who couldn't be bought, threatened, or intimidated. Slowly, his expensive suit creasing, Marcus lowered himself to his knees. Vanessa stood defiantly for a moment longer, but when the SEAL simply looked at her, really looked at her with those eyes that had seen real horror and real heroes, she too knelt. Now apologize, the SEAL commanded. And it better be sincere, because I've got nothing but time, and I promise you, I can make this last as long as necessary. Marcus cleared his throat. When he spoke, his voice had lost all its earlier arrogance. I'm sorry. What I did was wrong. I had no right to touch you, to hurt you, to speak to you that way. Vanessa remained silent until Rex took a single step forward. Then words tumbled out of her mouth. I'm sorry. We're sorry. It won't happen again. The SEAL looked at Sarah. Ma'am, do you accept their apology? Sarah, tears still streaming down her face, but for different reasons now, nodded slowly. Yes, she whispered. Good, the SEAL said. He pulled out his phone. Now I'm a lawyer myself. Military law. But I know plenty of civilian attorneys who specialize in assault cases. I recorded the aftermath of what happened here on my phone as soon as I saw it through the window. If you'd like to press charges, I'll stand as a witness. I'll make sure this goes all the way to court. I'll make sure justice is done. Sarah looked at him, this stranger who'd walked into her nightmare and transformed it into something else entirely. This man who'd done what no one else would do. Who'd stood up when everyone else sat down. Who'd spoken when everyone else remained silent. I just want them to leave, she said quietly. I just want this to be over. The SEAL nodded, respecting her choice. He turned back to Marcus and Vanessa. You're going to stand up now. You're going to leave a tip for this young woman. A generous tip. Let's say $5,000. Cash or check right now. Marcus's eyes widened. 5,000. You were willing to spend more than that on lawyers to destroy this diner, the SEAL said coldly. Consider it a bargain. Pay it now, or I make that call, and you can explain to a judge why you assaulted a service worker. Marcus, hand shaking, pulled out his checkbook. He wrote out a check for $5,000 and placed it on the table. Vanessa added her own check for the same amount, her face a mask of humiliation and rage. Now get out, the SEAL said. And understand this. I know your names now. Marcus and Vanessa Thornwell. I'm going to remember them. If I ever hear about you treating another human being this way, if I ever hear about another incident like this, I won't just be a witness. I'll become your worst nightmare. Do we have an understanding? They understood. Without another word, they practically ran out of the diner, their dignity left in tatters on the floor, where they'd forced Sarah to lie just minutes before. As the door closed behind them, the SEAL turned to Sarah. His expression softened, the warrior becoming human again, though the strength never left his eyes. Are you okay? Do you need medical attention? Sarah shook her head, wiping away tears. I don't know what I am. Thank you doesn't seem like enough. You don't owe me thanks, he said gently. You did nothing wrong. You deserved none of what happened to you. Never forget that. He looked around the diner again. The rest of you need to understand something. Silence in the face of injustice is complicity. Your fear, your convenience, your self-interest, none of that justifies standing by while someone is hurt. Next time, because there will be a next time, you need to be the one who stands up. You need to be the one who says no more. Because if good people do nothing, evil people win. It's that simple. Tom, the owner, approached with tears in his eyes. You're right. I'm ashamed. I should have protected her. Sarah, I'm so sorry. Sarah looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. We all have to do better, Tom. All of us. The SEAL gestured to an empty booth. Rex and I were actually looking for dinner. You still serving? Sarah laughed, a genuine laugh, the first in what felt like years. Yes. Yes, we are. What can I get you? Surprise me, the seal said with a small smile. I trust your judgment completely. As Sarah went to place his order, her hand still shaking slightly, but her spirit somehow stronger than before, something fundamental had shifted in Rosewood Diner. The other customers began to quietly leave tips far larger than their bills required, each one a silent apology, a small act of penance for their failure to act. One elderly man approached Sarah as she worked. My father always said that a society is judged by how it treats those who serve it. We failed that test tonight. But you, young lady, you passed. You kept your dignity when someone tried to take it from you. You're stronger than all of us. The seal ate his meal in comfortable silence, Rex lying beside the booth, alert but calm. When Sarah brought his check, she found he'd already paid, leaving a tip of $500 with a note. For your nursing school fund. The world needs more people like you healing its wounds. As the evening wound down and the diner prepared to close, Sarah found herself sitting across from the seal, who'd introduced himself simply as Jake. No last name, no details about his service, just Jake. Why did you do it? Sarah asked. You could have just walked away. You could have said it wasn't your problem. Jake looked at Rex, who'd placed his head on his master's knee. In the teams, we have a saying. The only easy day was yesterday. It means that life is hard, combat is harder, but you push through because people depend on you. But it means something else too. It means that every day presents challenges, moral choices, moments where we decide what kind of people we're going to be. He looked back at Sarah. I've seen what happens when good people do nothing. I've seen it lead to genocide, to terrorism, to the worst chapters in human history. It starts small. It starts with people thinking someone else will handle it, that it's not their place to get involved, that the cost of standing up is too high. But that's how darkness spreads. One compromise, one moment of silence, one act of cowardice at a time. But you're just one person, Sarah said. You can't stop every injustice. No, Jake agreed. But I can stop the ones right in front of me. I can refuse to be a bystander in my own life. And if enough people do that, if enough people decide that they won't tolerate cruelty, won't accept injustice, won't look away when someone is hurt, then maybe, just maybe, we change the world one confrontation at a time. Sarah nodded slowly. You've given me something back tonight. Something I thought they'd taken from me. I didn't give you anything, Jake corrected gently. I just reminded you what was already there. Your strength, your dignity, your worth. Those were never gone. They were just obscured for a moment by someone else's cruelty. But they're permanent parts of who you are. Marcus and Vanessa. They'll go home tonight and probably convince themselves they're victims. They'll tell a story where they're the good guys being persecuted by some crazy veteran. But they'll never forget what happened. They'll never forget that for once in their privileged lives, they faced consequences. And that matters. As Jake stood to leave, Rex by his side, Sarah stopped him. Will I see you again? He smiled. This is a good diner. I might just become a regular. True to his word, Jake did become a regular at Rosewood Diner. Every Tuesday evening, he'd come in with Rex, order a simple meal, leave a generous tip, and treat Sarah and every other staff member with the respect all human beings deserve. But his impact extended far beyond those Tuesday dinners. Word of what happened spread through the small town like wildfire. The story grew in the telling, as stories do. But its core message remained clear. Someone had stood up. Someone had said enough. Someone had refused to be a bystander. Tom, the owner, couldn't undo his moment of cowardice, but he could learn from it. He implemented a new policy at the diner. Any customer who mistreated staff would be asked to leave immediately, regardless of threats or consequences. He put his money where his mouth was, backing his workers over his bottom line. And you know what? Business got better, not worse. People wanted to eat at a place that valued human dignity over profit. As for Marcus and Vanessa Thornwell, the universe has a funny way of delivering justice. The recording Jake had made, while not used in court, somehow found its way onto social media. Viral doesn't even begin to describe what happened. Their names became synonymous with privilege and cruelty. Marcus's law firm asked him to take an early retirement. Vanessa's social circle, those shallow relationships built on status and wealth, evaporated overnight. They lost something money couldn't buy back: their reputation, their standing, their comfortable position in a world that had always bent to their will. Some people might feel sorry for them. Some might say the punishment exceeded the crime. But those people would be wrong. Because what happened to Marcus and Vanessa wasn't about revenge. It was about natural consequences. It was about the universe finally balancing its books. It was about the fact that in the age of smartphones and social media, cowards and bullies can no longer hide behind their wealth and power. Sarah, meanwhile, continued working at the diner while attending nursing school. The $10,000 from Marcus and Vanessa's checks, combined with Jake's tip and the outpouring of support from the community after the story broke, meant she could focus more on her studies and less on making ends meet. She graduated 2 years later with honors, accepting her degree with tears in her eyes, knowing her mother would have been proud. But Sarah never forgot what she learned that night. She learned that darkness exists, yes, but so does light. She learned that cruelty can be confronted. She learned that one person, one good person with the courage to act, can change everything. And she learned that her worth wasn't determined by how others treated her, but by how she treated herself and others. She also learned something else, something that shaped her entire career as a nurse. She learned that healing isn't just about physical wounds. It's about restoring dignity to people who've had it stripped away. It's about seeing the human being behind the patient. It's about treating everyone, regardless of their status, their wealth, their position, with fundamental respect. Now, you might be sitting there thinking this sounds too perfect, too neat, too much like a movie. And you'd be right to be skeptical. Real life is messy. Real life doesn't always deliver justice. Real life is full of stories where the bully wins, where the coward escapes consequence, where the victim suffers in silence. But that's exactly why the story matters. Not because it's unique, but because it's a reminder of what's possible when we choose courage over convenience. This is what can happen when someone refuses to be a bystander. This is what justice looks like when someone with the power to enforce it actually cares about right and wrong more than their own comfort. Think about Jake for a moment. Here's a man who spent years in one of the most elite military units in the world. A man who could have just ordered his food, eaten his meal, and gone home. A man who had every excuse to think, "Not my problem. I've done enough for this country. Someone else can handle it." But he didn't. Because true character isn't about what you do when it benefits you. It's about what you do when standing up costs you something. Jake risked physical confrontation. He risked legal complications. He risked his own safety by getting involved in a volatile situation. And why? Not for glory or recognition. He didn't even give Sarah his last name. He did it because it was right. That's the definition of a hero. Not someone with superpowers or extraordinary abilities. A hero is just an ordinary person who makes extraordinary choices when it matters most. A hero is someone who sees injustice and can't walk past it. A hero is someone who values another person's dignity more than their own convenience. And Rex? Don't forget Rex. That K9 wasn't just a pet or even just a service animal. Rex represented something important too. Rex was trained to detect danger, to protect his handler, to face threats without hesitation. But more than that, Rex represented loyalty, partnership, and unconditional commitment. The bond between Jake and Rex, forged in combat and strengthened through countless shared experiences, was a reminder that sometimes strength comes not from being alone, but from having someone, even a four-legged someone, who has your back no matter what. Let's talk about the other people in that diner for a moment, because their part of the story is perhaps the most important for most of us. They weren't villains. They were ordinary people, just like you, just like me. They had families, bills, fears, and responsibilities. They made a calculation in a split second that getting involved would cost them more than staying silent. And you know what? We've all been there. Maybe not in such a dramatic situation, but we've all had moments where we saw something wrong and convinced ourselves it wasn't our place to speak up. Maybe it was a colleague being bullied at work. Maybe it was someone being harassed on public transportation. Maybe it was witnessing discrimination or cruelty in countless small ways that add up to a culture of silence and complicity. It's easy to judge those diners. It's easy to say, I would have done something. But would you? Really? When your livelihood is on the line, when you're afraid of confrontation, when you're calculating the cost of being a hero versus the cost of being a bystander, the uncomfortable truth is that most of us, most of the time, choose silence. We choose comfort. We choose self-preservation. And that's why nothing changes. That's why bullies keep bullying. That's why the cruel keep being cruel. That's why injustice persists. Because good people, decent people, people who would never hurt someone themselves, stand by and let others do the hurting. So what's the solution? How do we become Jake instead of the silent diners? How do we develop the moral courage to act when action is needed? It starts with small choices. It starts with speaking up when someone tells a racist joke. It starts with defending a coworker being unfairly criticized. It starts with refusing to participate in gossip that tears others down. It starts with tipping generously and treating service workers with respect. It starts with recognizing that every interaction we have with another human being is an opportunity to either add light or darkness to the world. Moral courage, like physical courage, is a muscle. It needs to be exercised regularly or it atrophies. If we never practice standing up in small moments, we'll never have the strength to stand up in big ones. If we rationalize silence and inaction over and over in situations that feel insignificant, we're training ourselves to be bystanders when it really matters. Think about Sarah's journey in all of this. She went to work that day with dreams and plans. She was doing everything right. She was working hard, saving money, pursuing education, treating people with kindness. And then, in a moment, through no fault of her own, she was victimized, humiliated, and assaulted. This is a truth we don't like to acknowledge. You can do everything right and still have terrible things happen to you. The world isn't always fair. Bad things happen to good people. Cruelty doesn't only target those who deserve it. In fact, it often targets those who least deserve it because they're perceived as weak, as easy targets, as people who won't fight back. Sarah's response to her trauma is instructive. She didn't let it define her. She didn't let Marcus and Vanessa's cruelty become the story of her life. She could have quit, walked away, given up on her dreams. She could have become bitter, angry, hardened by the experience. No one would have blamed her, but she didn't. She took the pain, acknowledged it, felt it fully, and then used it as fuel to become something more. She let Jake's intervention remind her that goodness exists, that people can and do stand up for others, that her worth wasn't determined by her worst moment. This is resilience, not the absence of pain, but the refusal to let pain have the final word, not the denial of trauma, but the determination to not let trauma be the only story you tell about yourself. Now, let's address something important. Some people hearing this story might think, great, another violent solution to a problem. Another alpha male using intimidation and threats to get his way. But that interpretation misses something crucial. Jake didn't hit anyone. He didn't hurt anyone. He didn't even touch Marcus or Vanessa. What he did was use his presence, his authority, and yes, the implicit threat of consequences to create accountability where none existed. He used his power not to dominate but to protect. He used his skills not to harm but to prevent further harm. There's a significant difference between violence and the threat of force used righteously. Our entire justice system is built on this principle. Laws work not because everyone is good, but because there are consequences for being bad. Police carry weapons not because we want violence, but because sometimes the only thing that stops a violent person is the knowledge that violence can be met with greater force. Jake represented that principle in its purest form. He was the consequence that Marcus and Vanessa never thought they'd face. He was the voice saying no more when everyone else was silent. He was the force, controlled and directed, that created space for justice to exist. But here's what's crucial. Jake also knew restraint. He could have hurt Marcus. He probably wanted to. Anyone with basic human empathy who watched a man assault a young woman would feel that flash of anger, that desire for immediate physical retribution. But Jake controlled it. He used exactly as much force as necessary, no more. He created the outcome he wanted, justice and accountability, without adding more violence to the situation. This is what discipline looks like. This is what trained, controlled power in the hands of someone with strong moral principles looks like. It's not the power itself that's dangerous. It's power without morality, without restraint, without purpose beyond self-gratification. Marcus had power, economic power, and he wielded it like a club to hurt others. Jake had power, physical power, and he wielded it like a shield to protect others. The presence of Rex in all this adds another dimension. Military working dogs are incredible creatures. They're trained to detect explosives, track enemies, apprehend dangerous individuals. They save countless lives in combat, and when they retire or return home with their handlers, they often struggle, just like human veterans, with transitioning back to civilian life. But they also provide something invaluable: companionship, purpose, and for many veterans dealing with PTSD, a living connection to their service that's positive rather than traumatic. Rex wasn't just Jake's backup in that diner. Rex was Jake's partner, his friend, his reminder of who he was and what he stood for. And Rex's presence served another purpose. He was a visible symbol of service and sacrifice. Anyone looking at that military working dog knew, on some level, that both the dog and his handler had put their lives on the line for their country. That adds a layer of moral authority that can't be faked or bought. Marcus could buy an expensive suit, but he couldn't buy the kind of respect that comes from genuine service to others. Let's think about what happened after that night, beyond the immediate consequences for the people involved. Stories like this, when they spread, have ripple effects that go far beyond the original incident. In the weeks following that Tuesday evening, Rosewood Diner became a symbol. People came from surrounding towns just to eat there, to support a business that had learned to value its workers. They came to see where that incident with the Navy SEAL happened. They came because they wanted to be part of a story about justice, about standing up, about refusing to accept cruelty as normal. Local schools invited Jake to speak to students about courage, service, and moral responsibility. He always brought Rex, and the kids loved the dog while absorbing lessons about loyalty, training, and purpose. Jake never portrayed himself as a hero. He always emphasized that what he did was what everyone should do. Refuse to be a bystander. Stand up for those who can't stand up for themselves. Use whatever power or privilege you have to make the world more just. Sarah was invited to speak as well, particularly to young women, about surviving trauma, about not letting others define your worth, about the importance of resilience. She was uncomfortable with the attention at first, but she came to realize that her story, painful as it was, could help others who'd experienced similar situations. She could be proof that you can survive, that you can thrive, that a moment of victimhood doesn't have to become a lifetime of defeat. The story also sparked conversations in the community about how service workers are treated. Several other restaurants and businesses implemented policies protecting their employees from abusive customers. The conversation expanded to include how society values different types of work, how we often treat people in service positions as less than, as servants rather than as professionals providing valuable services. This is the power of one moment, one choice, one act of courage. It can start conversations, change policies, shift cultural attitudes. Not overnight, not completely, but incrementally, persistently, meaningfully. But let's not sugarcoat everything. Marcus and Vanessa's fall from grace was real, but it didn't destroy them. They still had wealth. They still had resources. They moved to another city, started over with lower profiles, probably learned to hide their cruelty better rather than actually changing who they fundamentally were. Because that's another uncomfortable truth. Not everyone learns from consequences. Not everyone has a redemption arc. Some people are just broken in ways that can't be fixed, or won't be fixed, because they don't believe they need fixing. Marcus and Vanessa likely still believe they were the victims, that they were unfairly persecuted, that the world is against them. People with that kind of entitlement rarely have the self-awareness necessary for genuine change. But you know what? That's okay. The point wasn't to fix Marcus and Vanessa. The point was to stop them in that moment, to protect Sarah, to demonstrate that actions have consequences, and to remind everyone watching that silence and inaction are choices with their own moral weight. Sometimes justice isn't about rehabilitation. Sometimes it's just about accountability. Sometimes it's just about saying, this far and no further. As time passed, the intensity of attention faded. Life returned to normal, or rather to a new normal. Sarah graduated, became a nurse, started her career. Jake continued his life, whatever that looked like outside of Tuesday dinners at Rosewood Diner. The other diners went back to their routines, hopefully carrying with them a lesson about courage and complicity. But the story remained. In a small town, stories like this become legend. They get told and retold, embellished and simplified, until they're more myth than memory. And that's okay too, because sometimes myths serve a purpose. They remind us of values we aspire to. They give us models of behavior to emulate. They show us who we could be if we were brave enough. Years later, Sarah was working in an emergency room when an older man came in with chest pains. As she was treating him, setting up his monitoring his vitals, he looked at her name tag and said, "Sarah Mitchell? Are you the Sarah Mitchell? From Rosewood Diner?" She smiled, a little embarrassed. "That was a long time ago." "My daughter heard that story," the man said. "She was being harassed by her boss, sexual harassment, constant comments, creating a hostile work environment. She was going to just quit, just walk away, and let him win. But then she heard your story. She heard about how you survived, how someone stood up for you, how you didn't let it break you. And she decided to stand up for herself. She filed a complaint, went through the process, and won. Her boss was fired. The company changed its policies. And it started because she heard about you." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm glad she stood up for herself." "So am I," the man said. "That's my point. You didn't just survive your own story. You gave other people strength to survive theirs. That's a legacy, young lady. That's something to be proud of." This is the final lesson of this story. The impact we have on the world isn't always immediate or obvious. Sarah probably had no idea that her worst day had inspired someone else to have their best day. Jake probably didn't know how many young people took his example to heart and started standing up against bullies in their own lives. We drop stones in the pond, and the ripples go out farther than we can see. We make choices, and those choices influence others, who make their own choices, and the consequences multiply and spread in ways we can never fully track. This is why every moment matters. Every choice matters. Every time we decide to speak up or stay silent, to help or walk past, to stand up or sit down, we're not just affecting that one situation. We're potentially setting in motion chains of events that will touch lives we'll never know about. So what's the takeaway from all of this? What's the message you should carry with you after hearing this story? First, if you're someone like Sarah, someone who's been hurt, bullied, made to feel small by people who have more power than you, hear this. Their cruelty says everything about them and nothing about you. Your worth is not determined by how others treat you. You are valuable, significant, deserving of respect simply because you exist. The fact that someone chose to hurt you doesn't diminish that truth one bit. And if you're in that situation now, surviving is enough. You don't have to be strong every second. You don't have to immediately turn your pain into purpose or your trauma into inspiration. Sometimes you just have to make it through the day. That's okay. That's more than okay. That's courageous in its own right. Second, if you're someone like Jake, someone who has power, skills, resources, strength, use them for good. Use them to protect, not to dominate. Use them to lift others up, not to keep them down. Understand that with capability comes responsibility. You don't have to insert yourself into every situation, but when you witness genuine injustice, genuine cruelty, genuine need, and you have the power to do something about it, do something. The world has enough people using their power selfishly. Be the person who uses their power selflessly. Third, if you're someone like the diners, someone who witnesses wrong and stays silent, understand that your silence is a choice with moral weight. You are not neutral. You are not just avoiding conflict. You are, through your inaction, enabling the continuation of harm. This is hard to hear. It's uncomfortable to acknowledge. But it's true. You don't have to be a hero. You don't have to confront every wrong personally. But you can call 911. You can record what's happening. You can check on the victim afterward. You can be a witness. You can speak up. You can do something, anything, other than just sitting there and letting it happen. And here's the thing. The more you practice small acts of courage, the more natural they become. The first time you speak up, your voice might shake. Your heart might pound. You might doubt yourself. But the second time is easier. The third time, easier still. Eventually, standing up becomes part of who you are. Eventually, you become the kind of person who can't stay silent in the face of injustice, because silence has become incompatible with your identity. Fourth, if you're someone like Marcus and Vanessa, someone who's used their privilege to hurt others, there's still time to change. I know I said some people never learn, but some people do. If you recognize yourself in this story's villains, if you see your own behavior reflected in their cruelty, you have a choice right now. You can defend yourself, rationalize your actions, convince yourself you're the real victim, or you can acknowledge the harm you've caused, make amends where possible, and commit to being better. It won't be easy. Taking accountability never is, but it's the only path to actually being the person you probably tell yourself you already are. You can have all the wealth, all the status, all the success in the world, and still be empty inside because you've chosen cruelty over kindness, domination over respect, taking over giving. Finally, for all of us, this story is a reminder that ordinary moments can become extraordinary. A Tuesday evening at a diner, a regular shift at work, a meal out with your service dog. These are not the settings we typically associate with life-changing events. But that's exactly when they happen, in the mundane, the routine, the everyday spaces where we think nothing significant will occur. This means we need to be present. We need to be aware. We need to be ready to act when action is needed. We can't sleepwalk through life assuming someone else will handle the hard stuff, will make the tough choices, will be the hero when heroes are needed. You are someone else. You are the person who might walk into a situation where your choice to act or not act will fundamentally alter another person's life. What will you choose? Who will you be in that moment? I started this by asking if you'd ever witnessed someone being treated cruelly. Most of you, if you're honest, will answer yes. Cruelty is not rare. Injustice is not exceptional. These things happen every day, in every community, to people who deserve better. But so does courage. So does compassion. So does the human capacity to stand up for what's right even when it costs us something. For every Marcus and Vanessa in the world, there's a Jake. For every moment of cruelty, there's a potential moment of intervention. For every victim, there's a potential protector. The question is whether we'll step into that role when it's our turn, when we're the ones who have to decide between comfort and courage, between silence and speech, between walking away and standing firm. Sarah's story didn't end in that diner. It continued in an emergency room years later, treating patients with the dignity she wished everyone had shown her. It continued in the inspiration she provided to people she'll never meet. It continued in every moment she chose not to let her trauma define her, not to let her worst experience limit her biggest dreams. Jake's story didn't end there either. It continued in every kid who heard him speak and decided to stand up to bullies. It continued in every person who saw his example and thought, I can be brave too. It continued in the reminder that service, real service to others, doesn't end when you take off the uniform. It's a lifelong commitment to principles larger than yourself. Even the stories of the silent diners didn't end that night. For some, it was a wake-up call, a moment of shame that transformed into determination to be better. For others, it was a missed opportunity that haunted them, a reminder of who they were when it mattered most. But for all of them, it was a moment they'd never forget, a moment that would shape how they responded the next time they witnessed injustice. And that's the power of these moments. They change us. They reveal us. They force us to confront who we actually are versus who we think we are or who we want to be. They strip away all the comfortable stories we tell ourselves about our own goodness and show us the truth of our character in high relief. So here's my challenge to you, the person hearing this story. Don't let it just be entertainment. Don't let it just be a feel-good tale that you enjoy and forget. Let it be a call to action. Let it be a mirror that shows you who you've been and a window that shows you who you could become. The next time you see someone being mistreated, someone being bullied, someone being taken advantage of, someone being hurt by someone with more power, what will you do? Will you be the person who looks away, who convinces yourself it's not your problem, who chooses comfort over courage? Or will you be the person who speaks up, who intervenes, who refuses to let cruelty go unchallenged? You don't have to be a Navy SEAL. You don't have to have special training or extraordinary abilities. You just have to be someone who cares more about doing what's right than about avoiding conflict. You just have to be someone who understands that how we treat the most vulnerable among us defines who we are as a society. Sarah wasn't special. She was an ordinary young woman with ordinary dreams, working an ordinary job. But her ordinary humanity deserved protection. Her ordinary dignity deserved respect. Her ordinary rights deserved defense. Jake wasn't superhuman. He was a trained professional, yes, but he was also just a man who'd made a commitment to stand up for others. A commitment he'd made in joining the military, yes, but also a commitment we all should make as human beings, sharing this world with other human beings. The truth is, we're all ordinary. We're all just people trying to get through life, trying to achieve our goals, trying to be happy. But within that ordinary existence are infinite opportunities to be extraordinary, to be kind when cruelty is easier, to be brave when cowardice is safer, to be present when checking out would be more comfortable. This story happened in a small town at a modest diner on an unremarkable Tuesday evening. It involved ordinary people in an ordinary setting facing a situation that, tragically, is far too ordinary in our world. But the outcome was extraordinary because one person chose courage over comfort. That person could be you. That moment could be tomorrow. That choice could define not just another person's life, but your own. So when this story ends, when you finish hearing about Sarah and Jake and that Tuesday evening at Rosewood Diner, don't just move on to the next video, the next piece of content, the next distraction. Pause. Reflect. Ask yourself honestly, who am I when it matters? Who will I be the next time someone needs someone to stand up for them? Because here's the final truth, the one that makes all of this matter. We don't need more people with wealth or power or status. We have plenty of those. What we need, desperately need, are more people with moral courage. More people who can't walk past suffering without trying to ease it. More people who use whatever power they have, however small, to make the world more just. We need more Jakes who intervene. We need more Sarahs who survive and thrive. We need fewer Marcus and Vanessas who hurt others. And we need far fewer silent witnesses who let it all happen. Which one will you be? The choice, as always, is yours. But understand that choosing nothing, choosing silence, choosing to look away, that's still a choice. And it's the choice that allows darkness to persist. So choose light. Choose courage. Choose to be the person who stands up. Because you never know when your moment will come, when you'll walk into a situation where someone desperate needs someone brave, where cruelty needs to be confronted, where injustice needs to be challenged. And when that moment comes, I hope you'll remember this story. I hope you'll remember Sarah, who deserved better. I hope you'll remember Jake, who refused to be a bystander. I hope you'll remember even the silent diners, whose failure to act was a choice with consequences. Most of all, I hope you'll remember that you have the power to change someone's life. You have the power to be the person who makes a difference. You have the power to stand up. Use it. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it challenged you or inspired you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Talk about it. Let it start conversations about how we treat each other, about what kind of society we want to live in, about the responsibility we all have to protect those who can't protect themselves. Subscribe if you want more stories that matter, stories that challenge us to be better than we've been, stories that remind us of the best parts of human nature even while confronting the worst. Like this video if you believe in standing up for what's right, if you believe in protecting the vulnerable, if you believe that silence in the face of injustice is unacceptable. Comment below and tell me, have you ever been in a situation like this? Have you been the Sarah, the Jake, the silent witness, or even the Marcus? What did you learn from it? How did it change you? Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear right now. Because this isn't just Sarah's story or Jake's story. It's our story. It's the story of what happens when ordinary people face extraordinary moral choices. It's the story of who we are and who we could become if we chose courage over convenience, compassion over cruelty, action over apathy. The bell above the door at Rosewood Diner still chimes when customers enter. Sarah moved on to her nursing career, but she never forgot where she came from or what happened that night. Jake still comes in for Tuesday dinners when he's in town, Rex always by his side. The booth where it all happened looks like every other booth, ordinary and unremarkable. But for those who know the story, it's sacred ground. It's a reminder that anywhere, at any time, someone might need you to be brave. Someone might need you to stand up. Someone might need you to be their Jake when they're at their most vulnerable Sarah moment. Will you be ready? Will you be willing? Will you be the person who changes everything? That's not just a question for the end of this video. That's a question for the rest of your life. And how you answer it, not in words but in actions, will define not just who you are, but what kind of world we all live in. Choose wisely. Choose courageously. Choose to be the person who stands up, because someone somewhere is counting on you, even if they don't know it yet, even if you don't know it yet. And that's not pressure. That's power. That's the incredible power each of us has to make a difference, to fight injustice, to protect the vulnerable, to be the change we want to see in the world. So go out there and use it. Be the hero of someone else's story. Be the reason someone doesn't give up. Be the force that stops cruelty in its tracks. Be the person who, when the moment comes and the choice must be made, chooses courage. Because the world has enough people who look away. It has enough silence. It has enough complicity. What it needs, what it's desperate for is you. The you who cares. The you who acts. The you who stands up. Be that person. Starting right now. Starting with the very next opportunity you get. The bell is chiming. Someone is walking through the door. And your moment to choose is here. What will you do?